Coming to you live from Johannesburg, this is Tonight with Jane Dutton. I'm Thulasizwe Semelane, standing in for Jane. Tonight, 5 finance ministers in 4 years. How has this insanity impacted our economy, our ministries, and our parliamentary processes? And the proposed changes to our picketing laws, forcing unions to help police spot the criminals at protests. That's Tonight with Jane Dutton. The latest Chief Financial Officer of the country, Tito Mboweni, gives his medium-term budget tomorrow, but we've had 5 finance ministers in 4 years. It's plunged our secure economy to near-junk status. Every year, our ministries are thrown into a budget and planning turmoil. And then we look at the proposed changes to our picketing laws. Unions will have to help police identify possible criminals in their protests. And South Africa's hard-won right to protected protests could be at stake. You can join the conversation by calling us on 011-759-6340, or you can tweet us using the hashtag Tonight with Jane Dutton. But first, Shahan Ramkisoon has all your news updates. Shahan?
Thanks, Thulas. Appreciate it. Our top stories tonight: government plans to get back the money stolen from VBS Mutual Bank. And the outcome of a forensic report will determine what criminal action will be taken against all the municipal staff implicated in theft and fraud. 14 municipalities illegally invested over 1 billion rand in VBS. As a result, most are in financial distress, and services such as water and electricity supply have been adversely affected.
Once we get all the information, to aggressively pursue lawsuits that will actually get as much of this money recovered as possible. Government otherwise will have a hole of 1.57 billion rand that will need to be funded somehow, or the community will have to forego the services. And I think that we need to really go aggressively to go and recover this money.
2 police officers accused of murder will likely be back at work tomorrow. They allegedly killed TUT student Katleko Monareng during a student protest in August. Constable John Slender and Captain Joseph Rapport appeared in court earlier today. They've been granted 2,000 rand bail each. They're scheduled to appear in court again in January next year. Students who attended today's proceedings were not happy.
We know these people are involved and they should be remaining behind bars in the time, because they have to go out and live their lives normally, and while we are here in mourning for Katleko's justice to be served. But we feel like justice is being delayed in the processes of the judgment of the ruling today.
And Foreign Affairs Minister during the apartheid era, Pik Botha, has been laid to rest in Pretoria. Botha died 2 weeks ago after a battle with cancer. The 86-year-old served as Foreign Minister for 17 years until the end of apartheid in 1994. He then worked under Nelson Mandela's cabinet before retiring in 1996. His friend, Moletsi Mbeki, paid tribute.
Pik was the quintessential nonconformist. He was also a great mischief maker, always a thorn on the side of the establishment. This is what I most valued about Pik. If our country had more nonconformists and mischief makers like Pik Botha, I'm sure we would not be in the trouble that we are in today. Such nonconformists in the upper echelons of a country's leadership would have long pointed out that the country needs a change of direction.
There'll be more news at 9. I'm back with NewsHour at 10. For now, it's back to Thulas.
All right, Shahan, thank you so much for that. Shahan Ramkisoon with the news updates. South Africa has had 5 finance ministers in 4 years, 3 finance ministers this year alone. There's been what government critics call the weekend special: Des van Rooyen, Pravin Gordhan, Malusi Gigaba Nhlanhla, and now Tito Mboweni.
Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Speaker, Mr. President, Mr. Deputy President,
The Excellency, Mr. President. How much time do I have, sir?
I have the honor to present the first budget of our fifth democratic parliament.
Of President Zuma's administration, the fourth democratic government of the Republic of South Africa.
And my first, indeed.
So all of this has got me inspired, so maybe I should just drop some bars right about now. It's Tito's time to tackle Treasury, but South Africans are a bit wary. Five finance ministers in 4 years, Des van Rooyen was in tears. Government critics named him a 2-minute noodle because of his reputation as Zuma's poodle. But let's get serious now. Tito Mboweni is set to deliver his maiden medium-term budget. But what's the point of a 3-year plan when we can't keep a finance minister in his post for even half that long? Des van Rooyen, Pravin Gordhan, Malusi Gigaba and Nhlanhla. We look at the fallout. My guests tonight are Phuthi Mahanyele, who is the executive chairperson of Sigma Capital, and political analyst Ralph Mathekga. Thank you so much. Good evening, and thank you for joining me. So you didn't know I could rap, right? All right, it didn't go as well as I thought it would, but, you know, still. You've got to give me credit for some skills. Let's get into it. Ralph, let me start with you. Tito Mboweni steps in to deliver the medium-term budget policy statement. I mean, in the last 4 years, it's been delivered by a different finance minister. What does this do in terms of our predictability and stability? I mean, what also lies behind some of the changes that we have seen politically?
Well, you know, Tulas, if you look at the leadership of National Treasury, that is the political leadership of Treasury, we have had instabilities. There is no doubt about that. In the last 4 years that you're speaking about, we have had too many ministers. And I think, however, that if you look at the staff within Treasury, even if there's been loss of staff, there are some senior Treasury officials who have actually left. But I believe that Tito comes from within the same circle of finance within South Africa. I mean, Tito...
He's not an outsider.
He's not an outsider at all. He was at the Reserve Bank, at the Reserve Bank as the governor. And now what you have at the Reserve Bank, you have got very interesting officials now at the Reserve Bank, whom I think they have been working very well with Tito. They also come from National Treasury. So you have the Reserve Bank being led by people from the National Treasury. You now have National Treasury being led by someone who has been the governor of the Reserve Bank. So I believe that when it comes to austerity, when it comes to the tone of the budget,
right.
Tito, I don't think he's going to go all the way out. I think he's an insider.
So the political direction doesn't change. But surely, Phuthi, if we say the medium-term budget statement and expenditure framework is about giving a sense of signals, you know, signposts that say, this is where we are going as a country in terms of managing our finances. Surely the lack of stability at the political helm of Treasury, it seems to suggest the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, I guess that's something that can look, that, you know, can be seen from that perspective. But the way I look at it is that it's kind of project cleanup. You know, from the perspective that you have a president that is focused on making sure that we can have an economy that is growing at the right levels. We've been trying to achieve 3% for quite a long time now, but, you know, that is what we're working towards. But it is coming against a background of parastatals with high amounts of debt and all of that. But, you know, so from that perspective, I think this is new leadership, you know. And, you know, one has got to take it from that perspective. The fact that we've got so much FDI that is focused on South Africa. Just earlier today, I was in a session where they were, you know, talking to a number of leaders from the EU who are in the country. It was arranged by Ambrosetti to the Italian versus South Africa investor conference. And that is going to be leading on to the investor conference that the president has set up this week. And so from that perspective, I think we can be sure that we are on it's a different trajectory. That's the view that
But I guess what I'm asking you,
Yeah.
Puti, if I make it very practical,
Yeah.
let's take the issue of the budget deficit.
Yeah.
I've been looking through the speeches. 2015, Nhlanhla talks about the budget deficit falling to 3% over the medium term. His medium term in 2015 would have suggested 2018. By now, we should be talking about 3%. 2017, Malusi Gigaba is the one delivering the budget speech. Guess what he says? The budget deficit will widen to 4.3% of GDP in 2017-18 against a budget target of 3.1% of GDP. That things like those, indicators like those, are hard to track if you can't keep the political principle in place.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's a very good point to make. But on the other hand, when one looks at the fact that the revenue base has also increased, but of course it has come from the fact that, VAT has been increased. I really see this as a work in progress. And I really don't, I think it's difficult to really measure it very, very crisply at this point. One has to really look at the various issues that are being tackled in order to get things on the go.
Ralph, in as much as I'm highlighting what I'm highlighting and what Puti is highlighting as well, the counter-argument is always to say that there's not been a change of government. There's simply been a change of personnel. It's the same government, ANC-led government, underpinned by ANC policies and overseen by Luthuli House, including people such as Enoch Godongwana at Luthuli House. Does that hold?
I mean, look, the president is elected through the party, and the president decide who is going to be the head of National Treasury, for example. I do think that the president usually make a very strong statement by the type of people that they actually appoint to that position. And even if there's been no change in terms of government, it has all been under the ANC. Clearly, I do think that there is a strong statement being made by appointment of Tito Mboweni to go there. I think that the president seems to believe that he can actually trust Tito to try to force upon South Africa some form of austerity measures. There has always been an attempt within Treasury to try to arrest the deficit. No doubt about it, there has always been that attempt. But I do think that with a personality such as Tito, even if you do have the management that understand the budget over a period of time at Treasury, with the personality such as Tito, you are actually saying that, you look at his public remarks, you're actually saying that the president is saying that actually I might cut the public sector wage bill. I might actually use a sledgehammer approach when it comes to austerity measures, when it comes to cutting the frills in government. There is no better way for me, for the president to make that statement than appointing Tito Mboweni to do that. Would you have done that with Nhlanhla Nene, for example? Personality-wise as well, Mr. Nene, always careful, was always soft on that. I don't figure Tito to be
I'm going
so
to take you up on that, but before
that.
I do that, I want to ask you, Puti, I've been looking through these speeches. For instance, the crises that we have in public, in state-owned enterprises.
Yeah.
The level of emphasis on the amount of, the extent to which they are in crisis and the kind of surgery that needed to be undertaken differs, from 2015 to 2018. It's things like those that I ask that, do we not get blindsided by some of these issues because there's not a continuous person, a thread that runs, almost running like a thread throughout these issues and throughout this period that is called the medium term.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, it is useful when you have a continuous process to be able to channel and be able to track things in a more consistent way. But, the reality is we are living in the country that we are living in, and politically things do go in the way that they do. But from an economic perspective, I really feel very positive that we are on a different trajectory. The fact that, for example, as I mentioned earlier, that I was, at this session with these international investors, they are so keen on being able to invest in South Africa. But the question that they ask is, are South African investors investing in South Africa? So our confidence in our own economy is important to make sure that we can tackle some of the challenges that we face of joblessness, of all the issues that we see. But, of course, one also has to deal with the high debt levels that one sees in the parastatals.
So given the high turnover in finance ministers, but the consistency in policy and perhaps the new trajectory that you're talking about, can institutions such as the ratings agencies take Tito Mboweni's word to the bank, excuse the pun?
I think so. I absolutely think so. I think, you know, together with the President and the Minister of Finance, I think we have a very good, solid team. And I think certainly from an economic perspective, we can, you know, expect to see a lot of changes. But unfortunately, it's not just a matter of just injecting the right messaging and investing in the right projects. It is a matter of also dealing with a lot of the past problems, which have resulted in excessive debt levels in the parastatals.
Right.
And the extent to which government on its own is able to deal with that is another question mark. I don't think that the level of debt is something that government can deal with on their own. And that is something that perhaps they'll need the private sector to come into, or perhaps even the international community. And also to have the right people, you know, in these organizations. So,
all right, Phuthi Mahanyele and Ralph Mathekga, thank you so much for coming through and having this conversation with me here on the Tonight with Jane Dutton show. Well.